Welcome back to Dark Domain, where we venture deep into the strange and the terrifying. Tonight I have 3 unsettling stories for you. An ancient secret hidden beneath Seattle, a house that doesn't want to let its visitors leave, and a hunger that refuses to be satisfied. Before we begin, here's a challenge for you. If you could have a supernatural ability, but it comes with a terrible curse, what would it be? Drop your answers in the comments before listening. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more spine-chilling stories that will leave you questioning what's real. Now let's get started. Beneath the surface, secrets of Seattle's underground. My name is Mark Reynolds, and until last month I was a city maintenance worker in Seattle. I've lived here my whole life, navigating the rain-soaked streets and watching the skyline evolve. But beneath the surface of this modern city lies a forgotten world, one that most people never think about. The Seattle Underground, a network of abandoned subterranean passages and basements that once formed the city's ground level before it was rebuilt after the Great Fire of 1889. My job often took me into these tunnels to inspect old utilities and ensure that nothing down there posed a risk to the bustling city above. It was routine work, and I'd grown accustomed to the eerie silence and stale air. But on a chilly Tuesday morning, something happened that I can't explain, and it has changed everything I thought I knew about this city. I was assigned to investigate a series of power fluctuations detected in the Pioneer Square area. The electrical grid had been experiencing brief outages, and the source seemed to be somewhere underground. Armed with a flashlight, a map, and my tool belt, I descended into the depths via a rarely used access point behind an old bookstore. The tunnels were, as I remembered, a labyrinth of brick walls, iron beams, and the remnants of a bygone era. My map showed the main corridors and utility lines, but as I traced the cables, I noticed something odd. A conduit split off from the main line, heading into an area that wasn't marked. Curiosity got the better of me. I followed the uncharted path, ducking under low-hanging pipes and stepping over debris. The air grew colder, and the walls began to change, from brick to an older, rough-hewn stone. After what felt like half a mile, I arrived at a large circular chamber I had never seen before. In the center stood a massive, archaic machine made of brass and steel, covered in gears, levers, and dials. It looked like something out of a Jules Verne novel. The machine hummed softly, emitting a faint glow from small glass tubes embedded within its structure. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding. This wasn't city infrastructure. There was no record of anything like this existing beneath Seattle. I reached out to touch one of the levers, and as my fingers brushed the cold metal, the machine shuddered to life. The humming grew louder and the glow intensified. Suddenly, the chamber was filled with projections, images flickering like old film reels, showing scenes of Seattle throughout different eras. I saw the Great Fire, the construction of the Space Needle, even events that hadn't happened yet, a futuristic skyline with buildings I didn't recognize. Overwhelmed, I stepped back, but the images began to blur together, and a sharp pain shot through my head. I collapsed to the ground, the world spinning around me. Before everything went dark, I heard a whisper. It must remain hidden. I woke up in the same chamber, but the machine was silent and the projections were gone. Dazed, I checked my watch. I'd been unconscious for over an hour. I needed to get out of there. As I made my way back, the tunnels seemed different. Passages that were once clear were now blocked and new paths had opened up. Panic set in as I realized I was lost. My radio crackled, but all I could hear was static. After wandering for what felt like hours, I stumbled upon another chamber. This one was smaller, with walls covered in strange symbols and writings in languages I didn't recognize. In the center was a pedestal holding an old book bound in worn leather. Against my better judgment, I opened the book. The pages were filled with diagrams of the machine I'd seen and notes about temporal stabilization and controlling the flow of time. One entry stood out. The device must be protected at all costs. If misused, it could unravel the fabric of reality. Only the Guardians shall know its secrets. A cold dread washed over me. Had I activated something I shouldn't have? Were the visions I saw glimpses of alternate timelines? Determined to set things right, I retraced my steps to the chamber with the machine. This time I was met by a group of figures dressed in dark cloaks, their faces obscured. One stepped forward and spoke in a stern voice. "You were not meant to find this place." "I didn't mean any harm," I stammered. "I was just doing my job." "Your actions have consequences," he said. "The machine is not a toy for the curious. It maintains the balance." "I think I activated it by accident," I admitted. "How do I fix it?" The figures exchanged glances. "You cannot, but perhaps you can help us." They explained that they were part of an ancient order tasked with guarding the machine, which was built by a forgotten civilization to monitor and preserve the continuity of time. My interference had disrupted its function, creating anomalies in the timeline. "Anomalies?" I asked. "Events that should not happen. Disruptions in reality," the leader replied. They needed someone from outside their order to recalibrate the machine, someone who had already interacted with it. Reluctantly, I agreed. Under their guidance, I adjusted the levers and dials, following intricate instructions. As I worked, the machine began to stabilize, its humming turning into a steady rhythm. "That should do it," I said, stepping back. "Thank you," the leader said. "But you must understand, you can never speak of this." Before I could respond, one of the figures touched my forehead, and everything went black. I woke up in my bed, sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream. But when I checked my phone, I saw that 3 days had passed. Returning to work, I tried to find records of my assignment, but there was nothing. My supervisor said I'd been on leave. Confused, I visited the access point behind the bookstore, but it was sealed off, covered in graffiti that looked years old. I began to question my sanity until I found the book, the one from the chamber, on my nightstand. Its pages were blank, except for one line. "The balance is restored, remember your promise." Since then, strange things have happened. People I know recall events differently, and places around the city seem changed. I overhear conversations about incidents that I have no memory of, and landmarks appear altered. I don't know what to make of it all. Maybe the machine couldn't fully fix the disruptions. Or perhaps, by involving me, the Guardians set in motion changes they couldn't foresee. I'm sharing this story not to convince anyone, but to unburden myself. If you're ever exploring the hidden corners of this city or any city, be cautious. Some secrets are guarded for a reason, and sometimes the past is better left buried. I no longer work for the city. I've moved to a small town far from Seattle, hoping to find peace. But every so often I catch glimpses, out of the corner of my eye, of flickering images and hear the faint hum of machinery. And I wonder if the balance was truly restored, or if my actions set something irreversible in motion. The house on Briar Road. I didn't believe in evil places until I set foot in the house on Briar Road. Even now, as I sit here trying to make sense of what happened, I can still smell the damp rot in the air, feel the cold grip of that place closing around me. It's like it's never really left me. It started with a phone call. A new case had come across my desk, unusual but not totally out of the realm of reason. A house in the small town of Elmsworth had recently gone up for sale, and prospective buyers had begun reporting strange occurrences. Lights turning on by themselves, windows rattling with no wind, and more disturbingly, a strange humming sound coming from the basement. It was classic haunted house stuff, but what caught my attention was the fact that it wasn't just one or two buyers. It was everyone who stepped inside, and none of them lasted more than an hour in the house before bolting for the door. I thought it was a simple case of urban legend, a town trying to sell a spooky tale along with its real estate. But I couldn't ignore the number of reports. The realtor had refused to enter the house after the second tour, and by the fourth incident, local police had gotten involved. The final straw came when a couple who toured the house reported seeing something they refused to describe, moving through the dark hallways. They left town that same night and never came back. By the time I arrived in Elmsworth, the town was buzzing with rumors. The house on Briar Road had been there for generations, passed down through one family for over a century. But after the last family died off in a car accident 10 years ago, it had sat abandoned. No one had set foot in it until the recent attempt to sell, and no one seemed to know much about the family that had once lived there. The locals only whispered about the house, as though speaking of it too loudly might wake it up. I arrived at the house just before sunset. From the outside, it looked like any other rundown Victorian-style home. Peeling paint, cracked windows, the lawn overgrown and wild. But there was something else, something harder to define. It felt wrong, as if the house itself was alive, watching me as I walked toward the front door. The realtor had left the key under the mat, too afraid to meet me in person. I couldn't blame her. Even standing on the porch, I could feel the weight of the place pressing down on me, thick and suffocating. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air inside was stale, damp with the smell of decay. Dust coated every surface, and cobwebs hung in the corners like curtains. I took a deep breath and switched on my flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a long hallway with faded wallpaper and creaky wooden floors. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard the faint sound of humming. I explored the house room by room, trying to get a sense of what had everyone so spooked. The upstairs bedrooms were empty, the furniture long since removed, but there was an undeniable sense of unease in the air, as though I wasn't alone. I shook it off and made my way downstairs, heading toward the basement door at the end of the hallway. The humming grew louder as I approached, a low, almost mechanical sound that sent a shiver down my spine. The door to the basement was heavy, its handle cold to the touch. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, and as I stepped onto the first creaky step, I felt the air change around me. It was colder down there, unnaturally cold. The basement was just as I'd expected, bare, unfinished, with exposed pipes running along the ceiling. But something felt wrong. The humming was louder now, filling the space, but I couldn't see anything that would be making the noise. No appliances, no machinery, just concrete walls and darkness. That's when I saw it. In the far corner of the basement, half hidden in the shadows, something moved. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light. But as I stepped closer, I realized there was something, or someone, lurking there. I aimed my flashlight at the spot, but the beam seemed to flicker, the light weakening as if the darkness itself was swallowing it up. "Hello?" My voice echoed in the empty room, but there was no answer. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, hunched over, its shape barely distinguishable from the shadows. My heart raced as I took another step forward, the floorboards groaning under my weight. Suddenly, the humming stopped, replaced by a silence so deep it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. And then I heard it. A low, guttural whisper, so quiet I could barely make out the words.
"Get out."
I froze. The voice was coming from the corner, from the figure that still hadn't moved. My mind screamed at me to turn around, to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I was rooted to the spot, staring into the darkness as the whisper grew louder, more insistent.
"Get out. Now."
I turned and bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind me. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I grabbed my flashlight and made for the front door, but just as I reached for the handle, it slammed shut on its own. The house groaned, the walls seeming to close in on me as that horrible whisper echoed through the halls. I ran to the nearest window, but it wouldn't budge. The whole house felt alive now, trapping me inside, determined to keep me there. The floor beneath me vibrated, and the walls seemed to pulse, as if something was moving through them, something I couldn't see.
"Get out."
The whisper came again, louder this time, closer. I didn't wait to hear it again. I grabbed a chair and smashed it through the nearest window, jumping through the shattered glass and landing hard on the overgrown lawn. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not stopping until I was back in my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the keys. As I sped away, I looked back at the house. It stood there, silent and still, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. Something was inside that house, something that didn't want anyone to leave. I drove straight to the police station and filed my report, but I could see the doubt in the officers' eyes. No one would believe me. They'd write it off as stress, as overactive imagination. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know that the house on Briar Road is waiting for its next visitor. The hunger. I've always had a pretty normal life. Job as a clerk at a small convenience store, a small apartment in the quieter part of town, and not much else to my name. I wasn't complaining. Life was fine, quiet, simple, easy. But lately, something's changed. It started about 2 months ago. I was working the night shift like I usually do when I felt it for the first time. A deep, gnawing hunger. Not the kind you feel when you miss a meal. It was worse than that. It felt like something inside me was empty, something I needed to fill. No matter how much I ate, nothing helped. I'd go through bags of chips, candy, entire meals, but the hunger stayed. It only got worse. I didn't tell anyone at first. Who would I even tell? It seemed crazy, like I was losing my mind. I tried to ignore it, convinced myself it was just stress or a bad stomach bug. But then came the dreams. In the dreams I was hunting. It's hard to explain, but I could feel this raw, primal need driving me forward. I'd be running through dark streets, my vision blurry, like I was chasing something. I never knew what I was chasing, but I could feel its pulse, its life force. And I needed it. The hunger, the same one that followed me while I was awake, was unbearable in my sleep. The worst part? I started waking up in strange places. At first, it was harmless enough. I'd wake up on the couch instead of in my bed or find myself standing at the window in the middle of the night, staring into the darkness. But then, one morning, I woke up outside. My clothes were dirty, my shoes caked in mud. I had no memory of leaving the apartment. No idea how I got there. The hunger was worse that morning. It was like something was clawing at my insides, demanding more. I couldn't focus at work. My hands shook and every customer that walked in made me uneasy. Not because I was scared of them, because I was drawn to them. I could hear their heartbeats, feel the warmth of their bodies as they passed by. I had to clench my fists to stop myself from staring at them too long. Then it happened. It was late, nearly closing time. A man came in, just a regular guy looking to grab a drink and some snacks before heading home. He smiled as he approached the counter, but I barely heard him. All I could hear was the thudding of his heart, steady and strong. All I could feel was the hunger, roaring inside me, demanding to be fed. I tried to focus on the transaction, tried to keep my cool, but my vision blurred. Sweat beaded on my forehead, and my hands trembled as I rang up his purchase. The hunger was overwhelming now, gnawing at me, clouding my mind. "Are you okay, man?" the customer asked, his voice pulling me out of my daze. I blinked, realizing how close I'd been to losing control. I forced a smile, my heart racing. "Yeah, sorry, just tired." But it was more than that. I could feel the hunger creeping up, trying to take over. I handed him his change, my hand shaking slightly, but I managed to keep it together. He gave me a concerned look, thanked me, and left the store. As soon as he walked out the door, I collapsed behind the counter, gasping for breath. I'd come so close to doing something I didn't even want to think about. My body trembled, my stomach twisted with guilt and fear. I hadn't hurt him, but it was a close call. I knew something was seriously wrong with me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of that moment at the counter, the way the hunger had almost taken control. I had never felt anything like it before, and the thought of what could have happened terrified me. But as much as I hated myself for what I had nearly done, I couldn't deny it. The hunger had faded, if only for a little while. The next day, it came back, worse than ever. The dreams returned, more vivid, more violent. I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat, the hunger gnawing at me, stronger than before. I knew I needed to find answers. I tried going to the doctor, but what could I say? That I felt an uncontrollable hunger, something deeper than food? That I had this urge to be around people, but not in a normal way? I ended up giving a weak explanation, something about stress and insomnia. They ran a few tests, said nothing was physically wrong with me, and sent me home. I tried everything: meditation, more food, distracting myself with work. But nothing helped. Every night the dreams would come, and every day I would feel that same emptiness gnawing at me. I was scared to go back to work, scared I'd lose control again. But I didn't have much of a choice. I needed the job, and no one else could cover my shifts. So I went back, telling myself that I'd stay calm, that I'd avoid letting the hunger take over. For a while I managed. I kept my distance from customers, avoided eye contact, and focused on staying busy. But the hunger never really went away. It was always there, just below the surface, waiting for a moment of weakness. I don't know how much longer I can keep it at bay. People are starting to notice. My boss, my co-workers, even the regular customers. They ask if I'm okay, if I'm eating enough. I just smile and say I'm fine, but inside I know the truth. Whatever this is, it's not going away. I don't know what's happening to me, but I know one thing. The hunger is getting stronger. And I'm not sure how long I can keep fighting it. And that's it for tonight. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to Dark Domain for more eerie tales. And don't forget, if you haven't already, let me know in the comments what cursed supernatural ability you'd choose. I'll be checking out your answers. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.